The past does indeed echo down through the present. It was, I think, a great gesture of hope in 1925 to found an institution that was to educate people. And I think that is a great gesture of hope for the future.
This university will live as a symbol of enlightenment that cannot die. I saw it today as a beam from a lighthouse of learning, nourishing the development spiritually, intellectually, and economically of Newfoundland, now and for generations to come.
It would be extremely difficult to overestimate the contribution that Memorial has made to every aspect of life in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Let us not fall into the trap of taking for granted a memorial that is now so big and so pervasive. Hold it in your mind. Cherish it. It has made us what we are. It will continue to be the dynamo that drives our society.
Memorial University seems to be determined to transform culture, to correct historical omissions, to genuinely engage in reconciliation, to welcome diversity, to make its home here, and in all ways make a real difference.
It's more than bricks and mortar and teachers and students. It's a place where we can learn, where we can grow, where we can develop, and more importantly, where we can safely dream about the future of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Good morning. Please stand as you are able for the entrance of the Memorial University Colour Party and the singing of the national anthem led by members of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment Band and the CLB Band. Please be seated. So that was my first mistake. Would you please stand again, please, for the national anthem? Please be seated. Well, good morning, and we acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups. And we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. Welcome to the annual Ceremony of Remembrance at St. John's campus at Memorial University of Newfoundland. My name is Earl Ludlow, and I'm honored to serve as your Chancellor. Each year, members of the university community come together across all of our campuses to pay tribute and remember those who have served. I extend a special greeting to those who are currently serving or have served in the armed forces and reserves, particularly the members of the Legion and the regimental band. This time of year reminds us that Memorial University is as much a symbol of remembrance as a poppy or a forget-me-not. 100 years ago, we were created in honor of those who served and those who gave their lives. We must remember that any success we have enjoyed over the past 100 years started with the sacrifice of a generation of young men. As a living memorial, we continue to honor those who offer to serve their country. Today, we remember that there were thousands of individuals and hundreds of thousands of families who had their lives changed forever because of the war. Their family stories were changed. Their family stories were changed forever when a loved one raised their hand and accepted the role as a protector of their country and their fellow citizens. We retell the stories of bravery and sacrifice so that we can keep their legacy alive. I now invite Dr. Janet Morrison, our president, to tell us her story.
Thank you, Chancellor. So the leaders I admire most choose to act in service to others. More than 100 years ago, thousands of young Newfoundlanders and Labradorians chose to act in service to others, to those they left at home, and to all of those who signed up, never imagining the slaughter they would face. What a vision the founders of Memorial University College had when they advocated for a learning community that would serve as a living memorial to their sacrifice. One that would provide educators, promote literacy, and lift people out of poverty. To create an institution of higher learning where young people would have the freedom to learn and better themselves and make choices about their future, where they would become the leaders of tomorrow. Choices that were taken away from so many on the battlefields of Europe, their plans left in rough draft, their sentences unfinished. As we look back over the past century, we see a story of resilience, opportunity, and progress at our institution, one created in their honor. Today, more than 118,000 alumni carry forward the legacy of those first 57 students who walked through our doors in 1925. At the opening of the college, John Lewis Patton said, quote, "A university is the consciousness of a community reaching out to a realization of the higher powers of the mind." He envisioned deliberate engagement by the community to enable, to shape, and to benefit from the realizations of the university, the realizations of teaching, of research, of scholarship, of creativity. The nature and successes of Memorial were and will be forever shaped by our origin and heritage of remembrance and respect. This was evident when Chancellor Ludlow was invited to join the team in France last year to repatriate our unknown soldier. Our connection to those lost continue to reverberate 100 years later. My family's connection to those lost is personal. These are excerpts from page 559 of the Second World War Book of Remembrance. William Bennett Rogers was the son of William and Nellie Rogers of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and the brother of James and Alan. At 11:55 a.m. on June 21st, 1945, the aircraft Dakota 4N563, with a crew of 6, including William, serving as pilot, departed their base in India to carry supplies to the British 14th Army at Makina, Burma. They failed to return from the operation. Searches for the lost plane were carried out without success. Initially listed as missing, the crew were officially listed as killed in action in 1946, although the bodies were never recovered, nor a crash site confirmed. Almost 50 years later, a hunter walking through the jungle discovered parts of a man's inscribed watch, which was soon identified as belonging to the second pilot of the crashed Dakota. Veteran Affairs Canada organized teams to conduct a mission which would ultimately result in the recovery of the remains of the crew. On March 5th, 1997, the 6 airmen were buried together in the Tukyan War Cemetery in Myanmar, formerly Burma. Quote, "Veterans marched in procession to the gravesite. Canadian soil was placed on the casket. The bugler sounded the haunting notes of the last post to the piper playing the flowers of the forest, and posthumous medals and a folded flag were handed to representatives of each family, including mine." When I married Kenneth William Rogers, I joined a family defined by honor, by duty, by sacrifice, by loss. Through their generosity and love, I came to understand what remembrance, the determinacy to never forget, really means. Memorial is rooted in remembrance. Few institutions carry a history as unique as ours. I am so proud to lead this learning community, one that honors the past, serves the present, and boldly pursues a better tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison, for reminding us that there are so many families that also act as living a memorial, and to family members that keep their stories alive. And obviously it is in your heart. Thank you. We're delighted today to have Dr. Sarah Lockyer, who is the forensic anthropologist with the Department of National Defense and Canadian Armed Forces, join us. Dr. Lockyer knows firsthand how important these stories and these people are to families decades after their passing. Dr. Lockyer was kind enough to join us last evening for a discussion on her work, and we are delighted to have her with us again this morning. I would like to invite Dr. Lockyer to come forward to speak about her work reconnecting families with their heroic ancestors. Dr. Lockyer.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chancellor. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning to give you a bit of the educational portion of today's ceremony and to talk about the Casualty Identification the Casualty Identification Program. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of said program and tie it to a Royal Newfoundland soldier that we were able to identify a couple years ago. So the Casualty Identification Program exists because there's over 27,000 Canadian service members who died and have no known grave following the First World War, the Second World War, and the conflict in Korea. So we don't know where they are. Now, we do believe that the vast majority of them are properly buried underneath a Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstone, like the one you see in the photograph. But if you take a look at the headstone in the background, it simply states a soldier of the Great War. So we don't know his nationality. So it's impossible really to know how many Canadians, which includes Newfoundlanders, are properly buried. If we take Tynecott Cemetery as an example, which is one of Commonwealth War Graves Commission's largest cemeteries linked to the First World War and linked to Passchendaele, it has 12,000 graves in that cemetery. 8,300 of those graves are a soldier of the Great War. We don't know his nationality. And once a body has been buried underneath a Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstone, they cannot be exhumed for any reason whatsoever. The sole most recent exception, of course, is the exhumation and repatriation of the unknown Newfoundland soldier that happened in 2024. So out of the 27,000, to give you a breakdown, there's just under 20,000 that are missing from the First World War. Over 8,000 are missing from the Second World War, and then we have 16 Canadian Army soldiers that are missing in Korea. New discoveries happen every year. Commonwealth War Graves Commission will respond to somewhere about 80 discoveries per year of human remains, and that could be British soldiers, Australian, Canadians, French, even German. And their goal is to respond within a 2-hour window so that they can go recuperate all of the human remains and then make sure that they are properly processed and assigned to the appropriate nation that goes with those human remains. Typically, it's due to artifacts. If there's something with the word Canada on it, for example, then it comes to us. We do 2 different types of investigations. The first one is called the identification of remains, which is the newly discovered skeletal human remains, and we try to identify them before we bury them. We're currently trying to identify 42 skeletons at this time. The other type of cases that we do is called the identification of graves. This is a purely historical and archival research process. Because like the headstone in the photograph, where in this case we know he's Canadian, some other headstones will give a rank, a date of death, or a unit. And using the historical and archive research material, we might actually be able to figure out who occupies that grave. But like I said earlier, we can't exhume that grave to get a sample for DNA analysis, for example, to confirm that identification. It's purely through historical or archival work, which means, unfortunately, that many of those types of cases are rejected due to insufficient evidence because we can't exclude everybody else. Since 2007, the Casualty Identification Program has successfully identified 36 sets of human remains, and we've been able to change 12 headstones from one unknown to one with a name on it. And the whole point, especially when it comes to the identification of human remains, is that so that they can be buried with their name, by their unit, and in the presence of family. The main portion of the work is linked to the historical research to try to figure out who went through the area, who died, and most importantly, who went missing in the area where the human remains were discovered. Then we do a lot of biological work, so forensic anthropology. I get as much information as I can from the skeleton, things like age, sex, and height, in the hopes to be able to relay that information to what's in the personnel files. Because the personnel files will usually have either a date of birth and a height. So if I can compare that against the skeleton, it helps narrow down the list of candidates. Unfortunately, for the attestation papers for the Newfoundland Regiment, they don't include a date of birth. They include age upon enlistment. So you might see something like 22 years, 6 months, which kind of helpful, but not really helpful. So that means more historical research to find a birth certificate or a baptism record linked to that individual who was most likely born in the 1800s to see if we can confirm his date of birth. One of the main things that's important to remember as well is that the human remains are not repatriated to Canada. They are buried in the closest appropriate cemetery to where they fell. That means that for me to be able to do the analysis of the skeleton, I have to travel to where the human remains are stored and do my analysis on site. Now, I do bring a bone sample back to Canada, and we do DNA analysis here. Now, one soldier that we've identified so far is Private John Lambert. In 2016, there were actually 4 sets of human remains that were discovered in Belgium. And originally, they were all mixed together, so we couldn't really separate the bodies from one another. But the main reason why we knew that we had a Newfoundlander within those 4 individuals is that there was an NFLD shoulder title that was found with those human remains. There were 2 other artifacts that were found linked to British units. So we knew we had 3 British individuals and 1 Newfoundlander. Admittedly, at the beginning, there was a little bit of confusion as to who is responsible for soldiers from Newfoundland, because, of course, during the First World War, Newfoundland was not yet part of Canada. But when Canada joined Confederation in 1949, the Canadian Armed Forces assumed responsibility of all Royal Newfoundland Regiment soldiers, both past, present, and future. So in that case, the investigation to identify the Newfoundland soldier did come to us. And it was admittedly one of the more complicated cases that I've had to deal with at this time, because we had 4 individuals. While we know one of them is from Newfoundland, we don't know which one of them is from Newfoundland. So that means there was 4 times the work in terms of first separating the bodies as much as I possibly could. It meant doing a full anthropological analysis on each individual to get an age range and a height range from every single one of them. And then it meant trying to find a DNA donor for the 16 Newfoundland soldiers that went missing in that area. A list of 16 is actually rather small. I get quite excited when my starting point is 16 soldiers, because that's not a lot. Many of the cases that I'm working on right now are linked to the Battle of Hill 70, and Canada has 1,300 missing from that battle alone. So that is the starting point for most of my cases. And if we have a unit identifier, like the 7th Battalion or the 16th Battalion, then the list gets greatly reduced immediately. So since we're starting off here with 16, that's a very, very small list of individuals. And the first points that we needed to do and the first thing we needed to confirm was the date of birth of all those 16 individuals. Because we now just assume many of them either lied about their age to enlist, or maybe they didn't even know what their actual date of birth was. So in this case, we actually got the rooms to help us out and their archivist, Greg Walsh. And I contacted him first, swore him to secrecy, and asked him if he'd be willing to find a birth certificate or a baptism record for all of the 16 who were listed as potential candidates for that Newfoundlander individual. He graciously accepted and was able to confirm the date of birth for every single one of them, and I would say about half had an incorrect date of birth or age upon enlistment in their attestation papers, so that extra research is quite important. In the end, however, we were able to identify this individual rather quickly. A lot of it is down to luck, I will have to admit, because within the list of 16, you don't really know where to start, so you just pick one at random and start researching in their family and seeing what comes up of the DNA test result. And in this case, Private Lambert ended up being in one of the first 5 out of the 16 that we started researching, and immediately we got a very good, very positive DNA test results for the youngest individual out of the 4. And that individual was admittedly the easiest from an anthropological perspective to recreate the body, because the body was so clearly a teenager compared to the other 3. One of them was over 30, and the other 2 were in their 20s. But when you have an individual who's a teenager, they're still growing, and your skeleton shows that. And in this particular case, it did in fact show. So once we got the positive DNA test results for the youngest individual of the 4, and they came back positive to Private Lambert, I made the decision that the case should go to the Casualty Identification Review Board, and I made the recommendation that that particular individual be identified as Private Lambert, and the board accepted that recommendation. So when we informed the family and the DNA donors for Private Lambert that it was, in fact, his human remains that were discovered, we asked them if they had any photographs of him, because there are no photographs in the personnel files usually. And thankfully, the Lambert family had always kept Uncle Jack, as they called him, as a part of their family story. So it's great when you have family members who know who you're talking about when you call them admittedly out of the blue, and the government of Canada is asking for some spit to do DNA, which is a very weird phone call to get. Or even so, the government of Canada is calling you out of the blue to say that your ancestor has been found and identified, and admittedly, for many of the families we contact, they have no idea who we're talking about. In most of our cases, the DNA donor and the next of kin, when we've successfully identified that individual, is sometimes a 3rd cousin once removed, or a 1st cousin 3 times removed, and they have no idea of who we're talking about. They've never heard the name, they don't even know how they're connected to that individual. So when it came to the Lambert family, it was quite reassuring that as soon as we called, they're like, oh yes, Uncle Jack, and then they just went into this marvelous story about him, about his family, and how the family kept his story alive all these years. So as you can see, he died in August during a battle in Belgium, and he was born on the 10th of July, 1900 in St. John's, Newfoundland. He was 16 years old when he enlisted. The family story goes is that he went to the recruitment office, and when he spoke to the recruiting officer, did in fact say, I am 16 years old. And he was told, that's too young, take a walk around the block and come back when you're older. So he took a walk around the block, came back and spoke to a different recruitment officer and told him he was 19 years, 3 months, which is what appears in his attestation papers, and was enlisted. I don't know who anybody could have possibly believed that this 16-year-old child was 19 years old. When I saw that photograph for the first time, it was literally almost like a punch to the gut, seeing how young this individual really was. So he enlisted in August 1916, which is a month and a half after the 1st of July, 1916, which was probably a driving force as to why he enlisted. He left for the UK later that same month, so that's a really quick turnaround. Usually it takes a couple of months or so, but within 2 weeks, he was overseas. He trained in Scotland, and he arrived in France in April 1917, and then less than 4 months later was killed in action. So now I'm going to ask a favor of all of you. Two favors actually. The first one is talk with your friends and your family about the Casualty Identification Program. We do have a website. You can go and Google casualty identification, and we're the first thing that comes up. Because public awareness, we're trying to increase it as much as possible. And the reason why is that we also need your help. We do have a registration form on our website, and I encourage everybody to take a screenshot of the slide here or scan the QR code in the corner, which will take you to the registration form. And this is specifically for individuals who have family members who are missing from the First World War, the Second World War, and the conflict in Korea. By registering just your contact information, all we need from you is details on the soldier who is missing, your name, and either a phone number or an email. That's all we need from you. But by having a point of contact into the family of the missing, it greatly accelerates the identification process, because finding the person in the family tree who can give the right type of DNA that's been extracted from the human remains, that's what takes a lot of time. So if we have a point of contact into the families, that process goes much faster. And another reason why I am asking you to really disseminate the fact that we have a registration form on our website and encourage anybody who has a missing relative to register is that I was informed a few months ago that 4 Newfoundlanders have been discovered overseas. I don't have any information on what location, what battle, even what war. I don't have any of those details yet, but I was informed ahead of time that 4 Newfoundland soldiers have been discovered, and we need to identify them. And I know full well how much the people of Newfoundland and Labrador remember those who were lost, remember those who were served. So I'm very hopeful that you might be able to help us identify those 4 Newfoundlanders so that they can be buried with their name, by their regiment, and in the presence of their family. I thank you all very much for your attention today, and thank you for being here.
Sarah, thank you again for your expertise, your time, and your encouragement that we can do more. We're so fortunate to have with us today musicians Brad Norris and Carl Lundergan. Brad has written a piece that is gaining a lot of attention. He has received multiple requests from other performers for permission to share this piece at ceremonies across our province. As Brad said, that is exactly what I had hoped for when I wrote this song. And here to perform The Unknown Soldier is Brad Norris and Carl Lundergan. Gentlemen.
At the early age of 19 years, I joined the regiment. The government will never know souls lost in the fray. My friends and I went to Pleasantville. Little did we ever know we would sign our lives away that day for the things we'd never known. Thousands of men enlisted, they say, for the battle overseas. We made up the 3 regiments, it was air, land, and sea. We departed St. John's Harbor on the big ship, the Florizel. It was on the 4th day of October in 1914. Life changed for us that day as we boarded to sail overseas. A one-way ticket for the most of us, and our unit, the Blue Party. Say goodbye to our families as the Narrows they disappeared. A boy became a soldier that day, but he still shed a tear. Down in the trenches of this foreign land, we climbed over family and friends. Some who died, some wish they had, some would never see home again. The bombs, the guns, they'd fire overhead as we look at our fallen comrades. The look in their eyes said it all as we crossed no man's land. Every day the count climbs higher, our supplies dwindle away. The government will never know the souls lost in the fray. Hope our friends and our families will remember us someday. A shout rang out, it pierced my heart, hope they heard me pray. Life changed for us that day when we boarded to sail overseas. A one-way ticket for the most of us and our unit, the Blue Party. Hope our friends and our families will remember us some way. We fought for king and country and the freedom you enjoy today.
The body of the unknown soldier was returned to St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, May 24, 2024, to his final resting place. May you find peace. Thank you.
This is the moment for us to not only commemorate those who died and not come back from war, but those that also pay homage to those who returned as transformed individuals, offering their youth, their trust, and their pre-war lives to safeguard our future, our innocence, and freedoms that we now experience every day. Please stand as you are able for the Ceremony of Remembrance, which will be the playing of the last post, the moment of silence. The silence will be broken by the lament, followed by the reveille and the act of remembrance.
They shall grow not old, for we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
Please remain standing to recognize the Memorial University alumni who died in the Second World War. And following that, Mr. Steve Grimes, Memorial Chaplain, will follow with a blessing.
In memoriam, 310 former students of the Memorial University College offered themselves for active service in the Second Great War, 1939 to 1945. The university holds in special honor the past students who have been reported dead or missing and whose names are here given. David Monroe Baird, Lawrence Bannikin, John Hamilton Barrett, Walter Robert Butt, Herbert Bond Clark, Roy Clark, William Bradley Collins, Thomas Joseph Delaney, John Kevin Evans, Victor Raymond French, Neil Willoughby Harnett, William Palmer House, David Simpson Kerr, Brendan David Lacey, Harold Lewis Learning, Lionel Edgar Legg, Wallace Clifford Luther, Edgar Raymond Martin, David Gordon Morris, Clarence Walter Parsons, Alexander Duncan Saint, Arthur James Sampson, Bernard Thomas Scammell, Francis Smith, Eric Augustus Snow, Charles Henry Stewart, James Robin Stick, Philip Francis Templeman, Harold Baxter Wareham, James Walcott Winter.
If you are willing, will you please bow with me for a brief blessing? Today we pause together in remembrance. We hold in our hearts those who served, those who did not return, and those who came home changed in ways we may never fully understand. May this moment make us more grateful, may it make us more humble. May it guide us to be people who choose peace, who care for one another, and who remember well. May their sacrifice shape the way we live. Amen.
Please be seated. We will now proceed with the laying of wreaths. So I invite Dr. Janet Morrison to lay a wreath on behalf of Memorial University, please. Lydia Strickland on behalf of Munsu. Christian Doble on behalf of the GSU. Dr. Lisa Moores, Mumfa. Kevin Howard, Nape. Andrea Darby King and Bill Cavanaugh, Cupid. John Hoskins and Kingsley Hoskins, Lumen. Kieran Noel and Tristan Poulin. Tommen. Catherine Dutton Mumpa. Wilford Squires, Memorial University alumni. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who participated in our ceremony and attended either in person or online today. This ceremony means a great deal to our community, and your support illustrates our commitment to the trust that was placed in Memorial. Please stand now if you are able, as the Royal Newfoundland Regiment and CLB band members perform once again for God Save the King and the Ode to Newfoundland, and also we will march off the colours at that time. Thank you. Thank you for attending, and that concludes our ceremony. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.